Well, good morning. I want to go ahead and get started to respect your time. There may be a few other people that join us as we go through today. There are 6 or 7 people that were signed up. But good morning. My name is Rob Ruthio. I am the Director of Small Business Support and Development for the Impact Beaverton program here at the Chamber of Commerce. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Along with me today are my colleague Gustavo Gordillo, our Senior Outreach Coordinator, and Jessica Dover, our interpreter. If you haven't already selected a language with the little globe button at the bottom of your screen, you can select English or Spanish, and Jessica will translate as we go through. Our workshop today is focused on a step-by-step guide to starting a business in Oregon and or Beaverton. I just mailed out, if you're pre-registered, I just sent you an email just a few minutes ago that has kind of a handout. That electric copy of the handout has some hyperlinks that are built in that might be helpful. They are some of the ones that are built into the presentation that I will share today. What I would like to be able to do to start out is to just go around for the folks that are here and have you share just a little bit about kind of the type of business you're interested in starting or the business that you have started. My name, I told you already, is Rob, and in the past I've run retail restaurant operations. I've worked in hardware stores, auto parts, and other things. I've also been a teacher for a while, and now my job here at the Chamber is to help and support anybody who wants to open or run or grow a business in the area, and help them with that process and our services that we have through Impact Beaverton, our free services. So I would look forward to a follow-up with any of you that are interested in one-on-one conversations. Gustavo and I are here to support you in your process of starting and running and growing your business. So if each of you would, and I'll just kind of go on along the top of my screen, just a little brief introduction of yourself and the type of business you're interested in starting, or if you've already run businesses, what type of business you have run in the past. Rochelle, you are the top on my screen, so if you would please share, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. Happy to be here. I think I had gotten an email from you last month because I'm a new Beaverton Chamber member. So I think I recognize your name.
Great,
So
thanks.
yeah. Hey everyone, it's Rochelle. So I have been running a nonprofit for domestic violence survivors because I am also one since 2015. And so I'm a community organizer and domestic violence activist with that. And before that, when I was in my domestic violence with my abusive partner when I was married, I had a housekeeping and meal business that I did because a lot of abuse was financial abuse. And I did that kind of as a family business with my kids while I was homeschooling. So I did that for about 10 years and then got out of the relationship. And then after a few years of healing, started the nonprofit. So now fast forward 2023. I have found that quite a few, over half, maybe 3/4 of survivors are entrepreneurs. And I have been working with them in our nonprofit, but there's only so much we can do as a nonprofit, right? To like promote survivors, entrepreneurs. And so a lot of them support our work and things like that. And so I have started a company called Allied Brands Collective. And it's on social media, Allied Brands Co. And we just kicked it off last week. So I built a website. We have a Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram. And basically, we're just using all the social capital we have as survivors to have a place where we can, so it's a threefold purpose, just really quick. One, public marketplace, everybody can come shop and support survivor-owned businesses. To a place where survivors can be and get mutual support from each other in a private space on Meetup. And then 3, a lot of my community partners are looking for resources that are trauma-informed for survivors, and we will all be certified survivor-owned businesses and be instinctively trauma-informed. So that's me. I'm Rochelle. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the detailed introduction, Rochelle. And yeah, lots of differences between for-profits and nonprofits in terms of what they can do and how they can accomplish and earn revenue streams. I also have a fair bit of background with nonprofits, so I do work with a lot of nonprofit organizations and getting them set up and filing 1023 forms and 990s. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, that's okay. Just let me know. All right, great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Kenneth, I see you next on my list, so please tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Yeah, so I'm actually coming from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I aspire to have multiple businesses, so I also have a nonprofit organization that is I do my 990s and all of that jazz. But first and foremost, was able to talk with the city hall and city councilman, superintendent about moving my organization and expanding to here. We do mentoring and tutoring, early career exploration for K through 12 students. Even had a chance to meet a few people over in Vancouver yesterday at this MLK event. But long story short, expanding that operation, but more so looking to, I'm actually new to the area as I actually work for Nike, but definitely looking to have like multiple income streams. So whether it's like a digital marketing firm, some form of like small business consultation, I have my MBA background in engineering. Basically, if I see a need in the city, I would definitely love to like establish some, a money-making endeavor. But essentially, just want to understand the route and getting a business set up, and obviously making it the most efficient as possible.
Awesome. Well, welcome to town, Kenneth. It'd be nice to have you here. And let me know if you want to get together and chat sometime. I'd be happy to help you get connected to some people around here that might be helpful. And kind of, getting to know the area, getting to know people, and how to leverage kind of some of those connections to get your business up and running, and we'll find ways to support the communities you want to serve. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Will you be at the will you be at the event this I think today?
Which event? The Chamber 101 event?
Yes, sir. I'll be there.
I'll be there, Kenneth.
Sweet. Well, hey, we're making
good.
connections
already. Love it. Yes, I'll be here for sure. So,
good.
Yeah, good. Look forward to meeting you then. Thank you so much. Cool. Norma, you are next on my list. Por favor.
Ok, mi nombre es Norma Palacios. Yo tengo una tienda aquí en la Allen Boulevard y la Lombard. Es una tienda de grocery store, de productos para
products for Peruvians and Guatemalans. And also we have a few different places here that of products that we sell here. It's a little corner store.
Muchas gracias, Norma, y bienvenidos. For those of you who have not been on these workshops before, Norma has been a client of ours at Impact for a while, and she's a regular attendee at our events. So always nice to have you, Norma. Thank you so much for joining us today. Mai, you are the next one on my list. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Rob, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mai Wood, and I recently launched, I think at the end of the year, we recently launched a small kettle corn business. I was looking actually to find a second job to support my two children who will be heading off to college. I have one that's there and one heading off next year. So my husband and I were brainstorming ideas on how to generate extra income. I had an old colleague who had a kettle corn business that was doing the Saturday markets. She has retired. Since COVID hit, they retired, and it was just sitting in her garage. So she called me one day and said, hey, would you be interested in purchasing this equipment? We thought about it. We went back and forth about it. We had no idea what we're doing. Said, sure, let's give it a try. Purchased her equipment, did a couple of Saturday markets, and decided, wow, this is something that we really, really enjoy. We both work full-time positions, my husband and I, but this gave us an opportunity to be creative, get to know folks in the community, and get to know each other as well. And we've decided we kind of want to take this a little bit further into seeing what it could do for us in the future. Again, we're just doing Saturday markets, but that is seasonal. And so just wanted to kind of, join these meetings, get to know folks, and see what it is. I'm learning a lot of what to do and what not to do, and it's really, really overwhelming. So I'm hoping that, I think this is the right place. I think just having these conversations is going to kind of help us, but I would love to see myself do this full time. but that's also scary too. And so that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. A nice introduction, Maya. And yes, you and everybody else who starts a business does that whole process of, oh my gosh, this is scary. What do I do? Oh, I made a mistake. Now what do I do? How do I pivot? Right. So your experience is just, I think, a similar experience that everybody else has had as they've started a business. I certainly had my own experiences that way. Of, oops, shouldn't have done that one. Oh, that worked out pretty good. Cool. Let's do more of that. So very glad you could be here today, Mai. Thank you so much. And Jose, you're the next one on the list. So welcome and a little introduction of yourself, please.
Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es
Yeah,
José.
good morning, everyone. My name is Jose. I'm with Jared Cleaning Services. We do residential and office cleaning and industrial, and we are here, like you all, to learn and to grow more. Thank you.
And again, thank you, Jose, for being here. Jose is another one of our regular clients with Impact and always adds some conversation and some good questions to our workshops today. So what I would like to do is I want to go through and you know, in the 45 minutes or 42 minutes or whatever that we have left, I won't be able to go through super detail on every one of these slides. And I know some of you have already gotten your business kind of up and running. So some of this will be a little bit of repeat. But really to see this as an opportunity to start conversation with each of you as a way to, you know, do follow up. And Rochelle and Kenneth, I look forward to meeting you when you come to the chamber later for Chamber 101. For those of you that don't know, Chamber 101, when people join the Chamber of Commerce, we welcome our new members and we give them a little overview, and we do that here in person. Gustavo and I really enjoy working with people one-on-one to help start and run and grow their business. So I will share my screen. Oops, host disabled participant screen sharing. Gustavo, can I please have magic powers again? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, so now I have my magic powers back. And so the presentation that I put together is really focused on kind of starting up your business and the different steps to do so. And just a little more, I said before that I would share a little bit more about Impact Beaverton. So Impact Beaverton is a program that's based here at the Chamber. It is a collaboration between the City of Beaverton Economic Development Department and the Chamber of Commerce to provide free one-on-one business counseling, educational workshops, site visits, assistance with grants, assistance with starting business for anybody that's starting or running a business in Beaverton. And for those of you who have been in Beaverton for a while, know the boundary lines are a little bit wonky for the city of Beaverton. So we certainly work with a number of people that are outside of Beaverton. So our job here is just to support small business as best we can. And most of our materials are available in English and Spanish. And an exciting development we have going on with our program, we have a conference room here that we are going to convert into a hybrid multi-language learning lab. And we'll have announcements on that coming up soon, but we would love to be able to serve more of our community that don't have English as a first language. And so we're in the process of doing that as well. So we already did the brief introduction. So the step-by-step guide to setting up your business in Oregon or Beaverton. We've already done that. I sent you a handout earlier if you were already registered. If you were not pre-registered, we can send you the handout. Maybe Gustavo could, if he has your email, he can send you that. It's basically a handout that is a little overview of or a summary of the presentation that we're doing today. I do enjoy having questions along the way. I will try to pause occasionally. If you have a question, you can either use the raise hand function, or what I would suggest is just there's not that many people on the call today. So if you just unmute your mic and say, "Hey, Rob, I have a question," I will be happy to stop and ask your questions along the way. At the end of the presentation, I can also then send you the slides. There's some listing of different resources that are available to people that want to start a small business, and some of those guides and some of those resources may be helpful to you. So the first big step in starting any business is trying to figure out what you want to call your business, what name you want to use for your business. And there's a couple of processes for choosing a name. I mean, one, you want to make sure your name is somewhat reflective of your industry. So when people hear the name like Jared's Cleaning Service, okay, now it's really clear what your business is and what you do. That's very helpful. But one of the first places to start is to do a name search at the Secretary of State. And I don't know if this will come up on my screen. When I click on that, you should be able to see a tab. I don't know if it's showing. Does it show up, Gustavo? Do you see the Secretary of State thing come up? It may not, because the way I'm sharing my screen. But if you go to the Secretary of State page, you can, if you have a name in mind already, you can search to find out, does that name exist in any business that's in Oregon? The key there is that if you have a business that you think you may want to expand outside of Oregon, you probably want to also check that name availability in other states where you might want to search. Obviously, one of the other ways you can search is through Google or the search engines to find out, is there a business somewhere else in the United States or even somewhere else in the world that has that name? So if I wanted to start a business and it was Rob's Hardware Store, and I wanted to start that in Beaverton, and I thought, I just want to run a local hardware store, I don't ever want to try to expand out, I could do a search on the Secretary of State for Oregon, find out that nobody has that other name, Rob's Hardware Store. That's fine. If I do a Google search, maybe I find there's Rob's Hardware Store in Jacksonville, Florida. That's fine. I'm not competing with them. They're also a small business. I'm a small business here. So there may be another business that has a very similar or the same name in a different state. But if I don't ever plan to expand to that state, it doesn't really matter. The other thing that becomes important is to look at the domain names, and there's lots of different providers for finding domain names, because once you register at the state, you did a Google search, and that was most helpful researching. Okay, great, thanks, Rochelle. Once you register your name at the Secretary of State, and that'll come in another couple steps. Once you register your name, that is public information. And I've had a situation just recently where a client that I was working with had wanted to set up had set up the organization already at the state level, went to register the domain name for the business, and somebody had already bought that domain name and said, oh, you can buy it for me for $3,000. So there are people out there that will buy up domain names and try to then sell them to you when normally you'd be able to get your domain name for a relatively inexpensive price. So what I would suggest is do your research, figure out the business name that you want to use, right? Then get the domain satisfied, and then go register with the state. So you could do that all within a day or two, but I would say register the domain name first through your internet provider, and then go ahead and register with the state, because then you already have the domain name locked up. So got it, and you got domain name first, perfect. All right, so those are the steps. And again, you also want to think about your image and branding. It could be Rob's Hardware Store. Maybe I don't want to use my first name. Maybe it's like Community Hardware Incorporated might be how I choose to do my name. So, so think in terms of the image that you want for your organization. That can be helpful in terms of establishing your name. So you have your name already identified. The next step before you go and register at the state level is to figure out what type of business you want. And I'm not going to go over these in super detail. I'll just go over these just real briefly. The easiest way to register a business is just what's called an assumed business name. And that's where you just get the name and basically you're a sole proprietorship, and then you run a business under an assumed business name. This would be the example of, I could just be a small hardware store and I could just say Rob's Hardware Store. And that's just my assumed business name. I don't create a corporation. I don't create an LLC. I don't do any of those things. And I can do business that way. There are a number of people that start a business that way. In fact, many people who do personal care like hair or landscaping services, et cetera, set up their business in exactly that way, just as an assumed business name. In Oregon, it's $50 every 2 years to have an assumed business name. So it's the easiest way to start a business and the cheapest way to start a business. The disadvantage of starting a business that way is that you don't get the liability protection that you do if you start a corporation or an LLC, which is a limited liability company. So there's a lot of different things that go into deciding form of business. The easiest, obviously, sole proprietorship, but you do want to think about kind of liability issues. If I'm going to be running a hardware store and I am going to be leasing out or renting equipment to people, there's a potential that somebody could get hurt. And if they get hurt and they sue my business to repay their injuries, if they ended up in a hospital or something, my personal assets are at risk if I'm a sole proprietorship. The benefit of being a limited liability company or corporation, and nonprofits also fit in this way, is it provides me some legal protection for my personal assets, so that if somebody were to get injured or to sue the business and we were to have to repay their hospital bills, the only thing that would be at risk is the business assets. And there are some complexities around that that I won't get into, but certainly worth consulting with a good accountant or attorney before you start out. The other benefit of other forms of organization is when you're sole proprietorship, it's really all the impetus for funding when you want to start the business is on you. Starting a corporation, you can create, there are several different types of corporations, but one of the benefits of starting a corporation is if you wanted to get investors, it's a way to give equity or ownership of the business to be able to raise money. And there's two main forms of corporation that you would look at. We won't think about nonprofits, so that's a third. There's what's called a sub-S corporation, which is a closely held, it's never a publicly traded organization. And for some small businesses that are capital intensive, like if I really wanted to start a hardware store and maybe I did a business plan and I realized I need $750,000 to start the hardware store, I may not have that much money, but I may be able to get some investors if I'm a sub-S corporation to be able to open the store. Maybe I get 10 investors at, $50,000, and maybe then I have enough money to start my store. So if you have capital intensive start to a business, sometimes a form of business other than a sole proprietorship or a limited liability company may be your best route. Okay. And there certainly are tax implications to each of those different forms of organization. Again, that's relatively complex stuff, and I'm not a tax accountant, so I can't give you specific tax advice. I certainly know a few people. I do know my way around the tax forms and stuff, so happy to talk to you about it if you would like to have a conversation about the different implications of the different forms of organization. For a lot of businesses, because of the protection of having a limited liability company, what's become one of the most common forms of new business is a limited liability company, because it provides you that legal liability or legal protection, but you still have primary control over your organization. It's relatively easy to set up a limited liability company, especially if you're a single member LLC. It's a little bit more complex than the sole proprietorship, but not much. And the registration in Oregon was $100 a year. So a little bit more expensive than a sole proprietorship, but for most businesses, having that extra legal protection is very helpful. So I will end there. I don't know if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Some of you have already had this conversation about choosing a form of business, but if you're kind of bouncing back and forth on this, this is an area where I would be very happy to meet with you to talk about choosing a form of business for your organization. And there certainly are some businesses that start out with one form of business and then they convert to another one. I've helped several people in the last 6 months to a year convert from being a sole proprietorship to an LLC. I've also helped a couple people transition from being an LLC to a different type of organization. And many years ago, I also helped another organization that started out as a for-profit business transition to a nonprofit business. So some process involved in that, but it's not as complicated as it might sound. So you've now figured out your name, you've now figured out the type of business you want. Now you're ready to go ahead and register at the Secretary of State. And if you go to, and this is the form that I sent you, the hyperlinks will bring you to the Secretary of State of registration. There's a bunch of different forms. Most of them you would create an account and register your business online. And you can do that whether you do an assumed business name, LLC, corporation, nonprofit corporation. And there are little guides within the Secretary of State page. There's a lot of good resources there that can help you in making that determination and then guide you through the process. There are, if you go to the Secretary of State page, you can get sample or PDFs of the different forms so you can look at them before you go online. And I would suggest go on, print the form, fill it out by hand as you're before. Make sure you don't have any questions so that when you sit down at the computer and you're ready to actually register the business, you kind of have all the details worked out. And again, super happy to help with that process. Both Gustavo and I have helped a number of organizations with that process. So, they ask certain questions in there about registering agent. That's if you have an accountant or somebody else register for you. If you're creating a limited liability company, the owners are called members. So don't get thrown off by that process. Your owners are members. The other one that to think about if you're going to start a limited liability company is it will ask you, are you owner managed company or a manager managed? And that's some people will start an LLC, but then they won't run the day-to-day operations, and then they'll hire a manager to do it. And that's the state of Oregon Secretary of State just wants to know if we have questions on the ground or want to visit the business, who's the person we can expect to talk to when we go visit that business. So that's why they try to ask, is it manager managed or owner managed, or what they'll call member managed, because the owners in a LLC are called members. I'm just checking the chat. Okay, so yeah, I was tracking that. So when you're setting up a corporation, that gets a little bit different because corporations then will have corporate officers. And when you register at the Secretary of State for Oregon, you'll have to have at least 2 different officers listed for your corporation. Usually will be a president and a secretary, or president and secretary treasurer. You may have more than that, but you'll at least be required to submit 2 different people as officers of the corporation when you create it. Nonprofits get a little bit more tricky when you're creating them. So if you have questions about starting a nonprofit, I don't want to focus on that in this presentation. Please let me know. I'm super happy to help with that process, because setting up a nonprofit at the state level, you still only need 2 corporate officers. But when you start filing at the federal level, if you want to become a charitable organization, you usually need to have at least 3 different officers, and those officers should not be related to each other, right? Family. Sometimes they are, but it's better if they're not. So again, as I mentioned before, you can always amend later your registration. You can change forms of organizations. You can change names of the organization through amendment forms. And if you have any questions about that, I would be happy to help you. So now you've registered, you've got your business all kind of set up at the state level. Now you're ready to go to the federal government, to the Internal Revenue Service, and get an employer identification number. And this is important, even if you are doing business as an assumed business name. I still think it's important to go get an employer identification number, even if you won't have employees yet, in part because it's important to separate kind of your business from your personal finances for a lot of different reasons. I won't go into those reasons, but attaining an employer identification number is relatively simple. It's a short online form where you would give the name of your business, you would give some personal information, and yes, they will ask for your social security number on this form. When you're going to get an employer identification number, please make sure you actually go to irs.gov and then look for it, because if you just type in employer identification number, you'll get all sorts of ads that come up of, oh, we can help you get an EIN, and then it's a third party that's going to charge you a fee, and then we'll have your personal information to get an EIN. And to get an EIN doesn't cost you anything. It's just a free registration with the IRS. And then that is how the IRS then tracks your business for tax purposes, right? So your employer identification number is an important piece of establishing yourself as a business. And you'll need it for other things like filing your taxes. Even at the end of the year, it's helpful if you're a sole proprietorship or an LLC. You would do your 1040 taxes, and then you have something that's called Schedule C that you attach to that, and some of you probably already know that. Keep in mind, this employer identification number is different than what's called a BIN number or a BIN, and you get that number when you start hiring employees, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But having an employer identification number to help separate you as an individual from your business becomes important. And part of the importance here, if you set up an LLC, this helps to separate out you as an individual from the business. And that's important for that legal protection, that liability protection. So if you kind of intermingle all your finances and there is no clear separation between you as an individual and how the business operates, then that legal protection of the LLC gets kind of cloudy, and could put yourself and your business a little bit more at risk. So relatively easy process. So after you've gone through registered state, super fast process, get an employer identification number from the Internal Revenue Service. And again, go directly to irs.gov to be able to register for an employer identification number. All right, so once you've done that, sorry, I skipped over this real quick. Once you have your EIN, then I think it's important to go open up a bank account in the business name. And you have to have an EIN to be able to open a bank account in the business name. And I think this becomes important because I think separating out your expenses and your revenues from the business and from your personal life is important. And some of you mentioned, I think Mai, you mentioned that you and I think your husband have full-time jobs, but you're running your business separately, right? So what this does is it keeps the business information, if you will, the revenues and expenses, business expenses and revenues, and your own personal life personal. Now, when you do your taxes at the end of the year, they all eventually get combined, but you do your personal taxes on those kind of full-time other jobs through your 1040 form, and then Schedule C is the records or the tax return for your business side. If you have a separate bank account, get what I would suggest, either get some checks or get a credit card in that bank account number. And then whenever you go buy stuff for the business, do it on the business credit card. It gets really messy if you go to, Target or Costco or wherever to buy stuff. You have some stuff that you bought on the same bill for personal use, some for business. It gets really tricky trying to separate that out and makes record keeping very difficult. Whereas if you have a bank account for the business, you may go to the store and buy some personal stuff and some business, but separate those out. So at the end of the year, when you're trying to define what's a business expense for your business, which is a tax deduction, right? It's really clear and really easy to do so. So you have the EIN, you've now opened a bank account, you probably got a few checks, hopefully, and a credit card in the business name, and then do all of your transactions for your business through that business account, right? It helps. You may have a bank that you use now. If you don't know anybody personally at your bank, I would suggest go in and talk to them. Your banker can be one of your good advisors for your small business. And what I would suggest is whatever bank you're using, go talk to them about who is their small business advisor or their small business banker. If they don't seem to have one, or the person is not been at the bank for very long where you go, you may want to look at some other banks, lots of different opportunities, but your business banker, your small business banker can be a really good kind of asset, mentor, advisor for your business. So I'd really suggest do a little bit of research, interview a couple different people and try to find a small business banker that you think will be helpful and that knows your industry. It can all be very helpful. So, and if you have any questions about that, let me know. All right, so the next big step is choosing a location. And for some of you, your home is your location, at least when you start. There's certainly a number of people we work with that basically run the business out of their home. These are sometimes personal services like doing massage. Some people who do hair may do it out of their home. There may be people who run a landscaping business or a painting business where they don't need a separate location. They don't need a retail location. They don't need a manufacturing location, and they base the business out of their home. And that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah, credit union's a great option. Thanks, Gustavo. That's certainly acceptable for many different kinds of business. The one thing that you may need to check depending on where you live is, are you okay doing business out of your home? I can give an example. So if you're going to be doing a lot of transactions and a lot of customers are going to need to come visit you, or you're going to be doing a lot of shipping and receiving, there are certain apartment complexes, there are certain homes that are in homeowners associations, and there are some parts of the city where there is restriction on how much business you can do out of your home. That all comes out of the planning division if you're in Beaverton, of what's the different zoning for your type of location. For most residences, as long as there's something called a home occupation permit that you can get that says, yes, you're doing business out of your home, but it limits the number of people that can come visit your space. It limits how much space of, you can take up or parking. So if you do want to do business out of your home where you're actually going to have either lots of shipping and receiving, or you're going to have lots of customers visiting, you probably want to check with the city. And if you're outside the city limits, the county, of can you do that type of business where you're located? If you're doing a professional service for people and you're just storing, your truck, or you're storing other things, usually you're going to be okay doing that. It's just something to think about if you're going to be a home-based business. If you're not going to be a home-based business, then you jump into that next level of complexity of running a business, and that's actually finding a physical location to run your business out of. And this is true whether you're a nonprofit, or you're doing manufacturing, or you're doing service, or you're doing retail. Because for some businesses, if you think in terms of, even if you want to do a consulting business or a counseling practice, having that physical presence can help establish you and give you credibility and a place to meet clients. And it's also a nice way to help separate out your personal assets of your home or where you live from your business, right? So those are some of the things to think about as looking for a location. One of the things I'll just let you know, nobody on the call today says that you wanted to start a restaurant, but if you want to start a restaurant, that can be a relatively expensive process. And if you try to find restaurant space in and around Beaverton right now, you really won't find hardly anything. They get snapped up really, really quickly. But there's a resource out there that some of you may or may not know about. It's called LoopNet. And if you're looking for kind of commercial space, LoopNet's a great place to start. If you're looking for a complex or kind of large space, I would suggest getting a commercial real estate broker. A lot of times those fees for them are paid for by the people that own the property. So talk to them up front if you get a commercial real estate agent about what their fees are, what their costs are. So you know what you're getting into. And then as you start looking at space, again, leases are relatively complex legal documents, but some of the things to think about, you will see listings that will say it's this many dollars per square foot per year. So, an average space around here might be around $30 or $32 per square foot if you're looking at a basic retail space. But keep in mind that number that they give you of cost per square foot per year, 2,000 square feet times $30 per square foot, right? You can do the math on that. It doesn't oftentimes include what are called CAM fees, or common area maintenance. So, retail spaces like a strip mall or inside of a building, they are going to do some of the landscaping, they're going to do some of the cleaning, they're going to do some of the maintenance and that kind of stuff. And so you're going to pay for that. The other thing to think about is lease terms. A lot of leases you'll see are called triple net leases, where you are actually then responsible for maintenance and fixing things if they break, etc. So leases are relatively complex legal issues. Usually you'll want to have a decent attorney to at least look through a lease before you sign it. Your commercial real estate broker can be very helpful in that process, and know that sometimes, not always, but sometimes you will have the opportunity to negotiate just about any part of a lease. Though again, in and around Beaverton space is a pretty tight commodity, so you may have a little bit less leverage in negotiating different lease terms right now, because a lot of building owners are able to get the terms that they're looking for just because space is so limited in some areas. So again, relatively complicated process, but a super important one when you're starting your business. And one of the things to think about when you're looking at a lease for your business is the length of the lease, right? So you're starting a brand new business. If you are starting a brand new business, you probably don't want a 10-year lease, because you don't know if your business is going to succeed for 10 years. You may not even want to try to get a 5-year lease. You may want to try to do a 3-year lease, or get a 1-year lease with a right to renew or first right of refusal. Again, relatively complex legal stuff. If you have questions, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, or give you a referral to some commercial real estate agents if that's the route you'd like to go. So, got your business set up, you picked a location. What's the next thing that you need to do is get a business license from the city. And you need to have a location before you do this. I don't need to go through this in detail. Wherever you're going to be doing business, if you're setting up in Beaverton, if you were just to type in Beaverton business license, again, make sure you're going through the city, right? beavertonoregon.gov. is where you would find, and we can certainly help you. City business license is relatively quick, relatively easy. It's $75 a year for a very small business. As you get above 5 employees or 4 employees, it gets a little bit more expensive based on number of employees, but relatively quick process to be able to get your business license from the city. If you're outside of the city, so if you're not in Beaverton, if you're in Hillsborough, you go to Hillsborough to get a business license. If you're in unincorporated Washington County right now, Washington County doesn't have business licenses, but that may change in the near future. So just one of the other things to think about when you're starting a business is once you've figured out the location you're going to do a business in, you need to get a business license in that city that registers you to do business in that city. The other benefit of getting registered within the city is then that city becomes a resource for you from the planning commission and from the other entities to help support you so that you've registered for a business license. They can also then help guide you in the process of, I'm starting a salon. And if you're a salon business, you have to have other licenses besides just a basic business license. So when you register with the city to get your basic business license, those people in the permitting office can then help guide you through the process of other licenses that you would need to be able to operate your type of businesses. Restaurants require certain types of licenses. Any kind of construction requires certain types of licenses. If you're going to be selling tobacco or alcohol, that's another set of licenses. So just things to think about, that there are some businesses require more than just a city permit, right, or license. And then the last comment there is when you're building out or occupying a facility before you can open for business, you have to get that final approval. And again, the city permit office can help you with this. You know, it's the fire department will come in and do, okay, here's the maximum occupancy. They'll do make sure sprinkler systems are working and that kind of stuff. So it can really take time. And for some people that are building out a facility or entering a facility, sometimes they think, oh, we're going to open in May and we're going to have construction done. And then if they don't have all the things in place to get the proper permits, the permitting process can really slow you down several months. If there's just even small things that need to be fixed before you can open. So just something to think about ahead of time. And again, getting to know the people in your local city, that may be Beaverton, but that may be somewhere else, for the licensing process is important because they'll help you. They want you to succeed. They want you to do well, but they can help guide you through that process. Okay, so next, decide on how you're going to get money from people, right? So many different options. It would take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to go through all the different options that you have to be able to take payment processing from people, right? So you need to decide for your type of business what makes the most sense, right? If you're a brick and mortar business, typically then you're going to set up, you're going to be able to take credit cards. You're either going to need an iPad, you're going to need a formal register. You're going to you have to decide, are we going to take checks, right? If you're going to be taking cash, which most businesses that have a retail are going to probably take some level of cash, how are you going to keep a till? So you really have to figure out in your industry and what are your customers expecting to be in terms of being able to take payments, right? So, and again, there are so many different options of providers that can do payment processing, and they do all cost money. And so as you're looking at payment, how am I going to get payment? You want to really investigate or interview 2, 3, 4 or more different providers to find out what are the fees associated. You know, the great advantage of people paying cash is then there's not extra fees like bank fees and credit card fees, etc. on top of it, but a lot of people don't carry cash. And so you usually need to be able to take some form of payment through credit cards. And as most of you know, those credit cards will charge most merchants somewhere around 3% for every transaction. So there may be a 50% per transaction plus an additional, or 50 cents, not 50%, sorry, 50 cents per transaction plus 3% or 2.5% of the total bill, right? So you think in terms of somebody just paid me $100. Well, I don't really get $100. I get $96.50 or $97 because of the bank and credit card fees. So these are important things to think about as you're setting up payment. You know, small business, you know, your super large businesses like a Costco or a Target that I mentioned before, they're going to pay a little less in transaction fees because they have so many transactions. For a small business, there are certainly different providers that are there for small business where you can keep your costs low, but those systems may not be as robust. And then a lot of businesses don't take them, like, and no knock to American Express, but people don't take American Express at a lot of places because they charge higher fees. So lots and lots of different things to look at, but you have to figure out how you're going to get money for people. And for some businesses, taking payment might mean, how are you going to do contracting, or how are you going to do installment payments, right? So use the example before that, if I'm going to start a hardware store, I may have clients who are going to come buy stuff on credit, right? They're going to come in, they're going to buy a set of paint, they're going to go off and do their stuff, and at the end of the month, I'm going to send them a bill, and then they're going to send me back payment. For other businesses, it's you do down payments, right? So I may, if I'm a landscaping business, I may have a contract or a bid for doing some landscaping at somebody's house that might say $5,000 for the total project. Well, typically they won't pay you the whole $5,000 up front, so you have to be really clear about, okay, I want 25% or 33% down up front. Halfway through the project, I get the other third, and at the end of the project, I get the other third. So there's a lot of complexities to how you're going to get paid by people. And a lot of that really needs to build off of the industry and the expectations within that industry, right? There certainly are some businesses, like a shop, somebody comes into your store to buy some groceries and they pay you right when they come in, right? So they come up to the register, you don't have people on credit. So relatively simple, but again, many different payment processing type things that are out there. So go find a few options and look into them. And if you're a business that has any type of inventory, you're going to look into kind of what's called point of sale system, or some kind of inventory tracking that both does the payment processing, but also does inventory tracking. And again, many, many different options out there for those type of tools. So if you have any questions about those, please let us know. All right, the next step. So now you're figured out how you're going to get money from people, and maybe you've already done your website ahead of time. But figuring out how you want to get paid is important, because for a lot of websites, you are going to be doing payment processing on your website. You want people to have the opportunity to buy things from you. Go to your website, right? Whether this is you're a restaurant and people are going to purchase and you're going to deliver, or they're going to pick up, or whether you're a retail environment and you're going to ship it to people. So the reason why I have figure out payment processing before setting up your website is, for most businesses, not all, you will probably want to be able to transact some form of business through your website. Again, if you're just a business where you're sharing information on your website and people aren't buying, setting up your website is much simpler. But again, for a lot of organizations, you're setting up a website where you can do some payment processing. So you want to figure out payment processing first. Even a nonprofit organization, right? You want to be able to take donations through your website. For your business, you want people able to buy stuff or put a down payment on a project for you, right? So not all businesses are going to have financial transactions on their website, but it's an important consideration. And again, there's a lot of different ways to set up a website, but the considerations in setting up a website are, who's going to do the regular updating? Now, there's a lot of platforms out there right now where if you're relatively tech savvy, you can set up your own website, you can do all your payment, you do your changes yourself, you're updating yourself, that's fine. So if you're good, you can do that. The hesitation I would suggest is, you may know somebody who says, hey, I can set up your website for you. And I always use the joke of, it's your cousin's brother's uncle's best friend or something like that says, hey, I'll set up your website for free. Right, that's wonderful, but then who's going to maintain that website? And website development can be pretty expensive if you've looked into it. So you kind of have to figure, if I'm really depending on my website to run my business, it may really be worth that $3,000 to $5,000. And yes, $3,000 to $5,000 is not an unusual amount to really set up and have somebody manage your website. If your business really hinges on the success of your website to help drive the success of your business, you probably really want to make sure you're finding some professional organization or individual that can help not only set up your website, but help then manage and update your website going forward, right? Lots of different things about setting up a website that I'm not going to go into, but the last one I'll comment on here is You also do want to think about when you're setting up your website of, do you want your website to operate in multiple languages? For some businesses, that's very important, right? That you may have more than just English and Spanish. You may have customers that speak Russian or speak Arabic or Vietnamese or Korean, right? If you think in terms of the communities in and around Beaverton, and if those customers can't really read through your website, it's going to be harder for them to navigate and find your services. So another consideration is, do you need different languages in setting up your website? All right, I know we don't have a ton of time left. I know it's 9:56. I have just a couple more slides, and then I will open things up for questions. So the next step, and this is if you're going to have employees. So the next step, we've got my website set up. I'm about ready to start doing business. If you're going to hire employees, you've just jumped into the next level of complexity of running a business. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one right now. There's something called combined employers registration that helps register you at the both city, county, not both, multiple city, county, state, and federal level to hire employees. Because once you hire employees, you are now responsible for collecting taxes, the FICA, the Social Security, Medicare. You're responsible for collecting income taxes, local transportation taxes, et cetera. So basically you become a tax entity, if you will, right, for the different jurisdictions. And so this is another, again, complicated process, one that you can work yourself through. But if you are going to have employees, you'll need to do this combined employers registration, which will register you for all the related entities. And this is where the business identification number comes from. So you have your EIN, which is your tax number for basically income and reporting with the government, right? And then your BIN number, business identification number, is the number that's used for your processing of all of your different payroll functions, right? So a lot of stuff that goes into this. And so if you have questions about this, please let me know. I've done a lot. I have a lot of background doing HR related stuff. But for a lot of businesses, you're going to have employees. And so you need to figure out this process. For most businesses, when you're going to set this up, and this will go on to the next slide, is once you've set up to hire employees, most small businesses will use a payroll processing service to do all that reporting. There's forms called the 941 form that does your quarterly reporting and paying of taxes for employee taxes. But most small businesses won't do all that work on their own. They'll set up with a payroll company that will do that processing for them. So they'll cut the checks, or they'll set up direct deposit for the employees. They'll take out all the money that's necessary for employment taxes. They'll submit those payments to the federal government, state government, local government, so that you can actually just worry about running your business, and they can do that work. Again, lots of different providers that do this. There's big, large national organizations. There are local providers, which might be a better option for you. But if you're going to hire employees, you're going to have to set up payroll processing. And for most of you, that's probably not something that you want to do individually. It's probably something that's just easier. It does add a little bit of cost to having employees, but usually it's very much worth the cost for most businesses. All right, almost last step. Next thing you need to do is you need to go find insurance. We're ready to start getting my business doors open. We're starting to hire employees, or we're interviewing people. Now I need to make sure I have the insurance to run my business. Lots of different types of insurance. There's asset protection in case there's fire or theft or other things. There's liability protection in case somebody gets hurt at your property. There's workers' comp insurance, which you have to have in case somebody gets hurt on the job. And most insurance companies you talk to can bundle these types of insurance. There's something called an umbrella insurance, which can cover a lot of different things. Again, as I recommended before, in finding a banker or finding an accountant or finding a payroll process, go interview a few people, talk to a few other business owners of what do they do related to insurance, but make sure you talk to a few different insurance agents or insurance brokers to find out what's the absolute minimum that you need, what's absolutely required, and what are the other protections that might be good for you to have, right? So lots of different things out there in terms of insurance. Talk to several different people, get several different quotes along the way. All right, last step is you find all those extra little permits that you need, licensing to open your doors. Again, lot of different businesses require a few extra permits, including childcare, construction, if you're doing anything related to firearms or medications, etc. So that last step is to make sure, okay, I have all the permits, all the registrations I need to open my doors, get all those permits. Again, your local permit office is really helpful in doing that. Again, any city that you're going to be doing business in, that's a good place to start for this. If you're in a county, just go to the county. That's what those people are there for in the permitting office. And then boom, you are ready to open for business. So, and I have that little thing about consider a soft opening. You know, it's nice to work out the kinks before, right? Invite your family and friends to come in to test out your restaurant before you open for everybody. And it's one of the things that we do here at the Chamber. We work with a lot of local businesses when they're opening to, bring them some business right when they're opening, and then do more of a ribbon cutting or grand opening when, okay, we've got our staff up, everybody's trained, we're ready to be full on business, and then you're ready to go. So those are the steps. That's a lot of information. Kind of have open Q&A time. I'm going to get out of my screen sharing for now and come back to see if I see any questions in the chat, or if you have an individual question, I can now see everybody's screen fine. If you want to use it, just raise a hand. I can see some of you. What questions do you have about this process? Go ahead, Rochelle.
You talked about soft opening and ribbon cutting, and as a new member, I've seen some of the things you've done with that, which is great with the chamber.
Yep.
How does that work when someone has a home-based business? Do you have a partner that we can go to, or do we go to the chamber?
So what we do at the Chamber of Commerce is we will do what's called, we have these events that are called coffee connections. And we sometimes will do these shared coffee connections where somebody who may not have a big physical space for us to be able to visit to still talk about their business or be highlighted. So we oftentimes will have somebody who's a home-based business, or they have a really small and you can't get 50 to 60 people who show up. So a lot of times we will support that. The home-based businesses to do a ribbon cutting, I mean, unless you have room to have a lot of customers, or it gets in that permitting zoning process. Like, can you have 60 people just show up for your business? It depends on where you are if you have the appropriate zoning and licensing. We can certainly talk to you individually about that. But a lot of times we would highlight that type of business at one of our shared events, where we do these things called shared coffee connections, where we may have the event at another like-minded business. Maybe it's another nonprofit. And then we would highlight your business at those events. Does that help?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those, and that's just somebody who just has a business. But for somebody who's starting and wants to do this soft opening or this ribbon cutting, that's not something that you've ever done for home.
We don't usually go to people's homes, right? Because it's a parking issue.
Or at the chamber or something.
Right.
So you can only facilitate that kind of thing at a brick and mortar.
Yeah, it's hard to do it otherwise, unless we haven't done what I'll call a virtual opening. I don't see any reason why we couldn't necessarily do that, but we haven't done that before. But we do occasionally have those shared coffee connections here at the chamber where we're sharing new partners. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions about starting a business in Oregon or in Beaverton that I can help with?
I have a question, Rob.
Please, Mike, go ahead.
You mentioned different cities and registering in different cities, and with the type of business that I have, it's more of I would do farmers markets.
Yep.
Does that mean that I would need to register with the city of Portland, city of Tigard, the city of Beaverton if I'm moving out and about?
Yeah, so when you're doing a food-based business that's going to be traveling like that, there are temporary permits that you get, temporary licenses that you get. The first place to think about whenever you're going to go to any location, if you go to the Beaverton's Farmers Market, or you go to Hillsborough, or you go to Forest Grove, or you go to Portland, is just ask them what's the registering process to be able to sell at your farmer's market. Usually there's two things. Usually there's a local permit, and it's a temporary because you're not setting up a permanent location, right? So there's a temporary permit, and they can help you usually get that. The second thing is that some of them will require you to show proof of insurance, right? That you need to show that you have the license, and you need to have some proof of insurance, and then they'll let you to operate. So I would check each of the different entities that you're going to go to for what the requirements are. It gets a little complicated with food stuff, because if you're setting up like at a corner for a short amount of time with like a food truck or something, there's There's less of a permit if you're there for 3 hours or less versus if you're there all day. But what I would suggest is any of the farmers markets or any of the like pop-up like Beaverton does, Beaverton Night Market a couple times a year. And that's basically a temporary permit, right? They tend to be relatively inexpensive, $50 or something like that to be able to sell for a day. Sometimes they're a little less than that. Sometimes they're a little more. So that's how you do that for the type of business that you're running.
Okay, I would love to see if I can schedule time with you separately. I have a lot more questions and I don't want to take up too much of folks' time here, but I would love if possible for you and I to kind of connect afterwards. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and I sent you an email earlier that had the link. Just send me an email back or call the number. I can put my number, my phone number in the chat. I'll put my email and phone number in the chat. You have it that way as well. And any of you, if you'd like to follow up on any of these, I am super happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, for your questions. All right. We got time for just a couple more questions. If anybody else has a question, please let me know. I'm just typing in my, okay, there's my email. Make sure I spelled it right. Yes, I did. And phone number are in the chat. What other questions do any of you have that I might be able to help with? Okay. I don't
Tengo
see
una
other.
pregunta. ¿Qué puede pasar
sí.
cuando uno
I have a question. What happens when you don't end up paying for a license, some type of license? Like, are there extra charges? Like, what consequences would there be?
Good question, Leticia. So it depends on the type of license. So a lot of the licenses aren't set up to be punitive necessarily. Like there's not always going to be some penalty because you didn't have a license. The city of Beaverton, I think if they find out that, okay, you've been operating in the city of Beaverton, you didn't have a Beaverton license, I think a lot of times they would just say, hey, pay your license. You don't have to, we're not going to charge you a penalty. But then you kind of get on the watch list and they'll send you information. There are other ones that can be much more risky, right? If you're trying to operate childcare without a license, or you're trying to sell liquor or tobacco without a license, or you're running a salon or spawn without a license, those are more likely because those are not just local, those are all state. So those ones are more likely to get you some form of penalty. Clearly, some of the organizations can just shut you down. They can just close your doors, right? So if the fire department comes in and you don't have the right certificate of occupancy, they can basically force you to lock your doors right there and then you won't be able to reopen until you meet the requirements. So it really depends on what permits you're talking about. Usually when you're talking about basic city permit, it's not real punitive. It's just get it in the future. And certainly with food related businesses like sometimes people will set up and people will come by, oh no, I don't have the right permit, I'm sorry. And they'll say, well, pay this, here's what the permit would cost for what you're doing, please pay that permit. Again, a lot of the cities, Beaverton included, aren't super punitive about it, but they want to just make sure that people are operating safely, because the city, state, county's concern is primarily that you're doing what you say you're doing, and that you're doing everything you can to keep your employees, yourself, and your customers safe. So thank you for your question, Leticia. Okay, so it is 10:09. I would like to thank all of you for participating in our workshop this morning. Again, thank you to Gustavo for helping to get things set up and for monitoring the chat and providing the links along the way. That's very helpful. And again, thank you very much to Jessica for her translating service. We always appreciate you being here, Jessica. Thank you so much. And if any of you have individual questions, again, please just send me an email or give me a phone call. I will be super happy to follow up with you. And I have time even this week. If you would like to meet, I'm always happy to meet you either here at the chamber, at your location or place of business, to help you get set up and operating, or if you're already up and operating, to help you grow and expand your business. So thank you very much to all of you for being here. If you look at our events calendar at the Beaverton Area Chamber of Commerce, just beaverton.org, you'll see other educational workshops that we have upcoming, including some here at the Chamber. So thank you again for your time and for your participation. I look forward to working with all of you in the near future. Thank you very much. Be well.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Bye-bye.